My name is Amelia. I'm 32 years old, and I never imagined my own family would betray me over an $8 million inheritance from my grandparents. The memory of the day my father yanked me by my hair and forcefully pulled me out of our family home is still vivid in my mind. But what they didn't know was that I had a plan, not for revenge, but for justice. What followed would shock everyone around us and alter all of our lives forever. Before I get into the most painful day of my life, drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to join me as I reveal how strength can arise from betrayal. I grew up in a grand colonial house in the wealthy area of Fairfield, Connecticut, thinking I was living the perfect life. Our family had everything: wealth, status, and what I believed to be love. My father, Andrew, was the CFO of my grandfather's tech firm, while my mother, Catherine, meticulously managed our social calendar. Then there was my younger sister, Lily, 3 years younger than me, with her perfect golden locks and captivating personality. From the moment she was born, Lily could charm anyone within minutes. She'd walk into a room and instantly be the center of attention, while I remained in the background, quiet and observant. My parents admired her effortless social skills, something I could never quite master despite trying for years. "Why can't you be more like Lily?" was something I heard far too often in our house. While Lily thrived at dance recitals and beauty pageants, I found joy in books and numbers. I was the awkward math nerd who preferred solving problems over small talk at my mom's fancy gatherings. The favoritism was clear in 1,000 little ways. Lily got the bigger room, the newer car when we turned 16, the more expensive clothes, and most importantly, more of our parents' attention. I tried not to let it get to me, especially since I had something they couldn't take away: my relationship with my grandparents, George and Caroline Hartman. They had built Hartman Technologies from a small garage operation into a $450 million company over the course of 4 decades. While my parents enjoyed the fruits of that success, they never truly understood the business itself. My grandfather would often joke, "Andrew can't tell the difference between coding and knitting." From the age of 10, I spent weekends at my grandparents' lakeside house, sitting beside Grandpa George as he taught me about market trends and business strategies. "You've got the Hartman business sense, Amelia," he'd say proudly. "One day, all of this will need someone who understands its core." Grandma Caroline was equally supportive, teaching me about investing and financial growth while my parents and sister spent lavishly. "Lily and your parents see money as something to spend," she once whispered to me. "You need to see it as something to grow. Always remember that." When I turned 14, my grandmother was diagnosed with terminal pancreatic cancer. Those final months were filled with quiet conversations in her garden lounge, where she imparted not only business wisdom, but also important life lessons. "Family isn't always what you think, Amelia," she told me, her voice now weak. "Sometimes the people who should protect you are the ones who hurt you the most. Promise me you'll always protect yourself." At the time, I didn't understand the warning. Why would I need protection from my own family? After she passed, my grandfather became even more focused on preparing me for a role in the company. He paid for my business degree at Harvard, visited me regularly, and introduced me to his network of business partners. Meanwhile, my parents pushed Lily into modeling and acting, paths that required constant financial support with no real return. During my time in college, I began noticing troubling signs about my parents' finances. Despite my father's generous salary, they lived far beyond their means. New luxury cars appeared in our driveway every year, my mother's jewelry collection grew, and they renovated our already extravagant home twice in 5 years. "Your parents think money grows on trees," my grandfather said to me during my junior year of college. "They've borrowed against their future inheritance more times than I can count. But don't worry about your future, Amelia. I've made arrangements." Those arrangements became clear in my grandfather's final year. After suffering a stroke, his health quickly declined. During one of our private moments, he squeezed my hand and said, "I've set aside $4.5 million for you, separate from the company shares are in a trust that will activate upon my passing. Your future is secure," my grandfather told me. I tried to thank him, but he waved away my gratitude. "You earned this with your dedication and intelligence. The company will go to your father to manage until he retires. But your inheritance is yours alone. Don't let anyone tell you differently. Those words would prove to be prophetic in ways I never could have imagined. The final 3 months of my grandfather's life were a blur of medical center visits, whispered consultations with doctors, and the steady decline of the strongest man I had ever known. I took a leave of absence from my marketing job at a competing tech firm to be by his side, while my parents and Lily maintained their distance, visiting only occasionally and briefly. "They're circling like vultures," my grandfather muttered. During one of his lucid moments, after my parents had just left following a 10-minute visit, already planning how to spend what they hadn't earned. "Don't talk like that, Grandpa," I said, adjusting his pillow. "They're just busy." He fixed me with a stare that retained all of its sharpness despite his failing body. "Amelia, listen to me. I've made provisions for you that no one can touch. The money is in a separate trust with the Hartman family attorney, John Wilson. $8 million that will come to you directly, not through your parents. Do you understand?" I nodded, uncomfortable with the conversation but recognizing its importance. "Your father thinks everything is coming to him to distribute as he sees fit. He's wrong. I've watched how they treat you compared to Lily. I'm correcting that imbalance." 2 weeks later, my grandfather slipped away peacefully in his sleep, my hand in his. The funeral was exactly as he would have wanted, dignified, understated, with tributes to his business innovation and philanthropy. I delivered the eulogy, my voice breaking only once as I described his belief in creating opportunities for others. What struck me during the service was how my parents and Lily stood, apart from me, both physically and emotionally. When family friends approached to offer their condolences, my mother smoothly intercepted them before they could reach me. Lily barely looked at me, instead playing the role of the grieving granddaughter to perfection for anyone watching. 3. Days after the funeral, we gathered in John Wilson's office for the reading of the will. The tension in the room was palpable as the elderly attorney adjusted his glasses and began to read. Most of the provisions were as expected: the family home to my parents, charitable donations to my grandfather's favorite causes, and specific bequests to longtime employees. Then came the part about the company. Majority control would indeed pass to my father, with the stipulation that certain key employees remain in place for at least 5 years. I saw my father's satisfied smile, and my mother's subtle relaxing of her shoulders. Then Mr. Wilson cleared his throat and continued. "And to my granddaughter, Amelia Hartman, I leave a direct inheritance of $8 million to be transferred immediately from the George Hartman Living Trust to an account in her name alone. This money is separate from company assets and is not subject to family financial decisions." The silence in the room was deafening. My father's face flushed dark red, while my mother's complexion went ghostly white. Lily gasped audibly, her perfectly manicured hand flying to her mouth. "There must be some mistake," my father finally said, his voice tight with controlled anger. John Wilson removed his glasses. "There is no mistake, Richard. George was very clear about this provision. He established this trust 2 years ago specifically. For Amelia. But what about Lily?" my mother demanded. "Surely there's an equal provision for her?" The attorney shook his head. "Lily receives her share through you, as George expected you to provide for her from the company profits. Amelia's inheritance is separate." The ride home was silent, but the storm broke the moment we entered the house. My father threw his keys against the wall with such force that they left a dent in the plaster. "You manipulated him," he snarled at me. "All those private meetings, all that time spent helping him. You were just securing your payday." "Dad, that's not fair," I protested. "Grandpa made his own decisions. I never asked for anything." "Liar," Lily screamed, suddenly beside herself, with rage. "Mom and Dad promised me that money. They said Grandpa was leaving it for me to start my acting career in Los Angeles. What did you say to him to change his mind?" I was stunned. "They promised you my inheritance? How could they promise something that wasn't theirs to give?" My mother stepped forward, her voice cold. "Your grandfather always intended that money to go to Lily. She has real talent that needs developing. You already have a career and don't need the money. You must have manipulated him when he was vulnerable." The accusations continued for hours. When I finally escaped to my apartment, my head was spinning. How did my inheritance become something my parents had apparently promised to Lily? Had they been telling her for years that this money would be hers? Over the next few days, I tried repeatedly to reason with my family. Each attempt was met with increasing hostility. My father suggested that I do the right thing and sign the money over to Lily. My mother claimed I had broken the family apart with my greed. Lily simply refused to speak to me at all. Unable to bear the tension, I temporarily moved into my grandparents' now empty house, using the key my grandfather had given me years ago. The familiar surroundings brought some comfort as I tried to process this shocking turn of events. I never imagined that this sanctuary would become the site of the most humiliating moment of my life. 2 weeks after moving into my grandparents' house, I returned from work to find my key no longer worked in the lock. Confused, I tried again, jiggling the key and checking to make sure I was using the right one. After several failed attempts, I peered through the window and saw that the interior locks had been changed as well. New, unfamiliar deadbolts gleamed in the afternoon light. I called my father immediately. "Dad, why can't I get into Grandpa's house? Did you change the locks?" "That house belongs to your mother and me now," he replied coldly. "We didn't authorize you to stay there." "But Grandpa gave me a key years ago. He always told me I was welcome." "Well, he's not here anymore, is he? His wishes were that the house come to us, and we decide who stays there." Anger bubbled up inside me. "So you're locking me out without even warning me? All my things are inside, clothes, my laptop, personal items. You can come collect your belongings tomorrow. We'll have someone present to supervise." Supervise? As if I were a thief rather than family? The indignity of it burned. "This is ridiculous. I'm coming over to talk about this in person." I drove straight to my parents' house, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. When I arrived, I found not just my parents, but Lily too, all sitting in the living room as if waiting for me. The atmosphere was thick with hostility. "This has gone far enough," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Changing the locks without warning is completely inappropriate. I need access to get my things." My father stood up, towering over me. "What's inappropriate is how you manipulated your dying grandfather to steal what should have been shared with your sister." "I didn't manipulate anyone. Grandpa made his own decisions." Lily snorted derisively. "Right. You just happened to be the only one there during his final months, whispering poison about us into his ear." "I was there because I cared about him. Where were you? Getting another nose job in Beverly Hills?" Lily gasped, and my mother rose to her feet. "How dare you speak to your sister that way after everything we've done for you?" "Done for me?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You favored Lily my entire life. The only people who ever treated me fairly were Grandma and Grandpa." My father stepped closer, his face contorted with rage. "Your grandfather was not in his right mind when he changed his will. We're contesting it. That money will go where it belongs, Lily. You can't contest it. The trust was established 2 years ago, before his health declined. It's legally ironclad." Something snapped in my father's eyes. "You ungrateful little—" Before I could react, he grabbed a fistful of my hair and yanked me toward the door. The pain was immediate and shocking. "Dad, stop. You're hurting me," I screamed, my scalp on fire as he dragged me across the room by my hair. "Richard, my car," Mother exclaimed, but made no move to intervene. Lily stood watching, a small smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. My father continued pulling me. "Dad, that's not fair," I protested. "Grandpa made his own decisions. I never asked for anything." "Liar!" Lily screamed, suddenly beside herself with rage. "Mom and Dad promised me that money. They said Grandpa was leaving it for me to start my acting career in Los Angeles. What did you say to him to change his mind?" I was stunned. "They promised you my inheritance? How could they promise something that wasn't theirs to give?" My mother stepped forward, her voice cold. "Your grandfather always intended that money to go to Lily. She has real talent that needs developing. You already have a career and don't need the money. You must have manipulated him when he was vulnerable." The accusations continued for hours. When I finally escaped to my apartment, my head was spinning. How did my inheritance become something my parents had apparently promised to Lily? Had they been telling her for years that this money would be hers? Over the next few days, I tried repeatedly to reason with my family. Each attempt was met with increasing hostility. My father suggested that I do the right thing and sign the money over to Lily. My mother claimed I had broken the family apart with my greed. Lily simply refused to speak to me at all. Unable to bear the tension, I temporarily moved into my grandparents' now empty house, using the key my grandfather had given me years ago. The familiar surroundings brought some comfort as I tried to process this shocking turn of events. I never imagined that this sanctuary would become the site of the most humiliating moment of my life. 2 weeks after moving into my grandparents' house, I returned from work to find my key no longer worked in the lock. Confused, I tried again, jiggling the key and checking to make sure I was using the right one. After several failed attempts, I peered through the window and saw that the interior locks had been changed as well. New, unfamiliar deadbolts gleamed in the afternoon light. I called my father immediately. "Dad, why can't I get into Grandpa's house? Did you change the locks?" "That house belongs to your mother and me now," he replied coldly. "We didn't authorize you to stay there." "But Grandpa gave me a key years ago. He always told me I was welcome." "Well, he's not here anymore, is he? His wishes were that the house come to us, and we decide who stays there." Anger bubbled up inside me. "So you're locking me out without even warning me? All my things are inside. Clothes, my laptop, personal items. You can come collect your belongings tomorrow. We'll have someone present to supervise." Supervise? As if I were a thief rather than family. The indignity of it burned. "This is ridiculous. I'm coming over to talk about this in person." I drove straight to my parents' house, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. When I arrived, I found not just my parents, but Lily too, all sitting in the living room as if waiting for me. The atmosphere was thick with hostility. "This has gone far enough," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Changing the locks without warning is completely inappropriate. I need access to get my things." My father stood up, towering over me. "What's inappropriate is how you manipulated your dying grandfather to steal what should have been shared with your sister." "I didn't manipulate anyone. Grandpa made his own decisions." Lily snorted derisively. "Right. You just happened to be the only one there during his final months, whispering poison about us into his ear." "I was there because I cared about him." "Where were you? Getting another nose job in Beverly Hills?" Lily gasped, and my mother rose to her feet. "How dare you speak to your sister that way after everything we've done for you?" "Done for me?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You favored Lily my entire life. The only people who ever treated me fairly were Grandma and Grandpa." My father stepped closer, his face contorted with rage. "Your grandfather was not in his right mind when he changed his will. We're contesting it. That money will go where it belongs, Lily. You can't contest it. The trust was established 2 years ago before his health declined. It's legally ironclad." Something snapped in my father's eyes. "You ungrateful little—" Before I could react, he grabbed a fistful of my hair and yanked me toward the door. The pain was immediate and shocking. "Dad, stop! You're hurting me!" I screamed, my scalp on fire as he dragged me across the room by my hair. "Andrew!" my mother exclaimed, but made no move to intervene. Lily stood watching, a small smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. My father continued pulling me through the house by my hair, my attempts to free myself only causing more pain. When we reached the front door, he flung it open and pushed me out onto the porch with such force that I stumbled and fell, scraping my hands and knees on the concrete. "Don't come back until you're ready to make this right," he shouted, slamming the door. I knelt there, stunned, tears streaming down my face. Our neighbor across the street was watering her garden and had witnessed the entire scene. She quickly looked away, pretending she hadn't seen my humiliation. With trembling hands, I picked myself up and limped to my car. I had nowhere to go, locked out of my grandparents' house, ejected from my childhood home, and my own apartment had been rented to someone else when I temporarily moved out. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I was homeless. I drove aimlessly for an hour before calling the only person I thought might help, my college friend Jasmine, who lived about 30 minutes away. When I arrived at her apartment, disheveled and still occasionally sobbing, she took one look at me and pulled me into a hug. "My God, Amelia, what happened to you?" Through broken sentences, I explained the situation, the inheritance, my family's reaction, being locked out, and finally, the physical assault. Jasmine listened in horrified silence. "You're staying here as long as you need," she said firmly, "and tomorrow, we're filing a police report about your father's assault." But I couldn't bring myself to take legal action against my own father, despite Jasmine's insistence. Instead, I sank into a depression that lasted weeks. I called in sick to work so often that I was placed on probationary status. I checked my bank account obsessively, afraid that somehow my parents would find a way to block my inheritance. But the money remained untouched. A fortune I couldn't bring myself to use while my life was falling apart. During this dark period, Jasmine did some digging online and discovered something disturbing. Lily had been posting photos on Instagram of shopping sprees in New York and Los Angeles, designer clothes, a new sports car, even a deposit on a luxury condo. The captions made vague references to coming into her inheritance and family taking. "Care of family?" "They're spending your money," Jasmine said, showing me the posts. "Or at least they're spending like they expect to get their hands on it soon." This revelation jolted me out of my depression. How could they be so confident? Then I remembered something my grandfather had mentioned once about my father borrowing against his expected inheritance. What if they had done something similar with my trust fund, expecting to repay it when they somehow got control of my money? I began researching my family's financial situation in earnest. Through business contacts and public records, I discovered troubling information. My parents had reorganized their house twice in the last 5 years. My father had taken substantial loans from the company. There were liens against several of their properties. Most shocking of all, I found evidence of massive gambling debts in both my parents' names. Hundreds of thousands of dollars owed to casinos in Atlantic City and Las Vegas. Their financial house of cards was on the verge of collapse, and they had been counting on my inheritance to save them. The pieces were finally falling into place. My inheritance wasn't just about favoritism or Lily's career. It was their financial salvation, and they were desperate enough to assault their own daughter to get it. The revelation about my parents' financial situation changed everything. This wasn't just about family jealousy, it was about desperation and possibly fraud. I needed professional help to navigate this situation, so I reached out to Thomas Reynolds, a law school friend who had specialized in trust and estate law. We met at a quiet coffee shop far from my parents' social circles. Thomas listened intently as I laid out the entire situation, occasionally jotting notes but mostly absorbing the complex family dynamics and financial maneuvers. "Your grandfather set up a solid trust," he said when I finished. "Legally speaking, that money is yours and should be untouchable by your parents. But something doesn't add up. The way they're acting suggests they believe they have some way to access those funds. Could they contest the will based on mental competency?" I asked. Thomas shook his head. "Unlikely to succeed. The trust was established 2 years before his death, and from what you've said, he was fully competent then. But we should get copies of all the documentation to be sure there aren't any loopholes or unusual provisions." This began a meticulous process of legal research. Thomas filed formal requests for all documents related to my grandfather's estate, and the trust established in my name. Meanwhile, I secured a temporary position at a small marketing firm to keep myself afloat while living with Jasmine. I wasn't ready to touch the inheritance money. Something told me I might need it intact for whatever battle lay ahead. 2 weeks later, Thomas called with disturbing news. "I've reviewed the documents from John Wilson's office, and something's not right. The trust agreement they provided has some unusual provisions that weren't standard 2 years ago when it was supposedly created." "What kind of provisions?" I asked. "There's language about family discretionary control that effectively gives your father veto power over distributions from the trust. It doesn't match your grandfather's clear intention to give you independent control." My stomach dropped. "Are you saying the documents were altered?" "I can't prove it yet, but I'm suspicious. We need to find out if there are original copies somewhere else or witnesses to the original signing." This led me to reach out to my grandfather's former executive assistant, Linda Martinez, who had retired shortly after his death. Linda had always been kind to me during my visits to the company headquarters. Of course, I remember the trust being established, Linda confirmed when we met for lunch. Your grandfather was very specific about it being under your sole control. He didn't trust your father's financial judgment. Do you know if copies of the original documents exist anywhere? Linda thought for a moment. Your grandfather kept duplicates of all important documents in his private safe at the lake house. He gave me the combination once in case of emergency. It might still be there if your parents haven't found it. The safe was hidden behind a false panel in the library of the lake house, a place my parents rarely visited even before my grandfather's death. With Linda's detailed instructions and the combination, I planned a careful visit when I knew my parents would be attending a charity gala in New York. The lake house felt eerily quiet as I slipped in using the spare key hidden in the boathouse, another secret my grandfather had shared with me years ago. I found the safe exactly where Linda had described, and my hands trembled as I entered the combination. Inside were dozens of folders, meticulously labeled in my grandfather's handwriting. I found what I was looking for in a folder marked Amelia's future. The original trust documents were there, along with a sealed envelope addressed to me. I took everything and carefully closed the safe, leaving no trace of my visit. Back at Jasmine's apartment, Thomas and I compared the original documents to those provided by John Wilson's office. The differences were subtle but significant. The original trust gave me complete control of the funds, while the version from Wilson's office included provisions allowing my father to protect family interests by restricting my access. This is document fraud, Thomas said gravely. Someone altered these after your grandfather's death. The sealed letter provided the final piece of the puzzle. My grandfather had suspected my father might try something like this and had taken precautions. He had video recorded his statement of intentions regarding my inheritance, and a copy of the recording was stored with his personal attorney in Boston, not John Wilson, whom my father had pressured to use. Your father has gambling debts that could sink the company, my grandfather wrote. He and your mother have borrowed against their inheritance repeatedly. I fear they may try to access your trust fund to solve their financial problems. If anything seems wrong after my death, contact Bernard Abrams in Boston. He has everything you need to protect what is rightfully yours. Bernard Abrams turned out to be a formidable ally. Not only did he have the video recording, but he also had correspondence from my grandfather documenting concerns about my father's financial mismanagement of company funds. Your father suspected he might be embezzling, Bernard told me during our first meeting. He was planning to audit the company books before his stroke hit. With this information, Thomas helped me develop a comprehensive plan. We would gather evidence discreetly, building a case that would be irrefutable when presented. I began reconnecting with my grandfather's loyal employees, especially those in the finance department who might have noticed irregularities. Through these conversations, I discovered something alarming. My parents were planning to sell the company to a competitor for a fraction of its value, apparently needing quick cash rather than the steady long-term income the business could provide. Lily, it turned out, had played a role in all this. During my grandfather's illness, she had visited him specifically when he was medicated and confused, having one-sided conversations about how she would take care of the money and manage the company inheritance. A hospice nurse had documented concerns about these visits, noting that my grandfather seemed agitated afterward. As the pieces came together, my determination grew. This wasn't just about my inheritance anymore. It was about honoring my grandfather's legacy and protecting the company he had built from being dismantled by my parents' financial desperation. The final part of my plan came together when I learned that my parents had scheduled a meeting with the company board to announce the sale. With Thomas's help, I prepared for what would be the most important confrontation of my life. The Thomson Technologies boardroom had always intimidated me as a child. 16 leather chairs surrounding a massive mahogany table, portraits of past company leaders, including my grandfather, lining the walls, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Hartford. Today, however, I felt a strange calm as I waited in the adjacent office with Thomas and Bernard Abrams. Through the company grapevine, we had learned exactly when my father planned to announce the sale to Deltasoft Industries, a competitor that had been trying to acquire Thomson Tech for years. The board members, key executives, and even Lily would be present for this momentous decision. Remember, Thomas whispered as we heard voices entering the boardroom. Stay calm no matter what they say or do. The evidence speaks for itself. We waited until my father's voice rose in his characteristic important announcement tone, a sound I recognized from countless family gatherings where he dominated the conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, after careful consideration of market, conditions, and future prospects, Catherine and I have decided that selling Thomson Technologies to Deltasoft represents the best path forward for everyone involved. Their offer of $180 million is fair. That was our cue. I pushed open the boardroom door with Bernard and Thomas flanking me. The shock on my father's face would have been comical under different circumstances. I apologize for interrupting, I said clearly, my voice steadier than I had expected. But there are some critical facts the board should know before any sale is considered. This is a private meeting, my father snapped, recovering quickly. Security will escort you out. Lily, dressed inappropriately formally for a business meeting, in what looked like a cocktail dress, glared at me from beside my mother. Arnold Weber, the longest-serving board member and my grandfather's close friend, stood up. Let her speak, Andrew. Amelia is George's granddaughter and has as much right to be heard as anyone in this room. My father's face flushed, but he couldn't object without appearing unreasonable. He gestured sharply for me to proceed. Board members, I've discovered evidence of serious financial improprieties that directly impact any decision about the company's future, I began, nodding to Thomas, who distributed folders to everyone at the table. These documents show that the company has been used as collateral for personal loans without proper board approval. As the executives flipped through the evidence, I continued, furthermore, I have reason to believe that my grandfather's final wishes regarding his estate have been deliberately misrepresented. I nodded to Bernard, who set up a laptop and projector. This is a video my grandfather recorded with his attorney 2 years ago, specifically addressing his concerns. The room fell silent as my grandfather's face appeared on the screen. Though visibly aged, his mind was clearly sharp as he detailed his estate plans. I am establishing a separate trust of $8 million for my granddaughter Amelia, he stated firmly. This money is completely independent from company assets and control. I have observed disturbing financial behavior from my son Andrew and his wife Catherine, including gambling debts and unauthorized borrowing against company assets. I fear they may attempt to control or access Amelia's inheritance upon my death. My mother gasped audibly. Lily's perfectly made-up face contorted in disbelief. My grandfather continued, I am recording this statement because I suspect attempts may be made to alter my wishes after I'm gone. The original trust. These documents give Amelia full control of her inheritance with no family oversight provisions. Any documents suggesting otherwise have been tampered with. When the video ended, the silence in the room was deafening. Then Arnold Weber spoke, his voice tight with controlled anger. Andrew, is this true? Have you been using company assets as collateral for personal loans? My father stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. This is a family matter that has nothing to do with the company sale. George was confused in his final years. He made this recording 2 years before his death. Bernard interrupted. And we have the original trust documents that match his stated intentions exactly. He held up the papers I had retrieved from the Lake House safe. These differ significantly from the versions recently filed with the probate court. My father's face went from red to purple. This is ridiculous. Amelia has manipulated. We also have evidence of document tampering, Thomas added smoothly, opening another folder. The original documents and the filed versions have been forensically compared. The alterations are quite sophisticated, but unmistakable. Board members began murmuring among themselves, expressions ranging from shock to disgust. My mother suddenly burst into tears. We had no choice, she wailed. The gambling debts would have ruined us. Andrew promised he could win. It all back, but it just got worse. We needed Amelia's trust money to keep the creditors away. The boardroom erupted. My father shouted at my mother to be quiet. Lily jumped up, pointing at me accusingly. You've always been jealous of me, always trying to steal Dad's attention. Grandpa promised that money was for my acting career. Lily, I said quietly. Grandpa never promised you anything. That was Mom and Dad promising something that wasn't theirs to give. Arnold Weber banged his hand on the table for order. Andrew, in light of these allegations, the board must immediately suspend any sale discussions. Furthermore, we need to conduct a full forensic audit of the company finances. My father lunged toward me, his face contorted with rage. You ungrateful little... Two security guards, whom Bernard had quietly arranged to be present, stepped forward. Arnold Weber stood up. Andrew, control yourself or you'll be removed from this meeting. Your behavior only lends credibility to these accusations. Realizing he was losing control of the situation, my father changed tactics. This is all a misunderstanding. George and I had an arrangement about the company finances. As for Amelia's trust, we were only trying to protect her from misusing such a large sum at her young age. Thomas stepped forward. Mr. Thompson, we have documentation of over $2 million in gambling debts in your name and your wife's at various casinos. We also have evidence that you've been selling company assets without board approval to cover personal expenses. Would you like to explain that as well? The board members looked at my father with growing horror. Lily had fallen back into her chair, mascara streaking down her face as she realized the gravity of the situation. My mother, surprisingly, was the one who finally broke. It's all true, she sobbed. We've lost everything. The house is mortgaged. To the hilt. The cars are leased with company money. Andrew's gambling got out of control years ago. We've been keeping up appearances, but we're drowning in debt. She turned to me, her carefully maintained facade crumbling completely. We were desperate, Amelia. When your grandfather left you that money instead of us, it felt like our last hope was gone. We thought if we could just access your trust, we could fix everything. By stealing from me? I asked, my voice breaking slightly. By physically assaulting me? By turning Lily against me? My father made one last desperate attempt. The company sale can still solve everything. Deltasoft's offer is 40% below market value, I interjected. I've had independent valuations done. You're selling at a desperate discount because you need immediate cash, not because it's what's best for the company. Arnold Weber had heard enough. This meeting is adjourned. The board will convene an emergency session without the Thompson family present to determine next steps. Andrew, consider yourself suspended from all company duties pending investigation. Security will escort you from the building and restrict your access to all company systems and facilities. As security approached, my father's demeanor changed from aggressive to defeated. His shoulders slumped, and for the first time I saw him as he truly was. Not the powerful, intimidating figure of my childhood, but a desperate man who had gambled away his integrity along with his money. Lily rushed past me toward the door, unable to face the consequences of her role in this debacle. My mother remained seated, crying quietly, all pretense gone. Abandoned as I turned to leave with Thomas and Bernard, Arnold Weber stopped me. Amelia, your grandfather always said you were the one with the true Hartman business sense. Once this mess is sorted out, I hope you'll consider taking a role in the company's future. I nodded, unable to speak through the knot in my throat. The confrontation was over, but the real work of rebuilding both the company and my life was just beginning. The weeks following the boardroom confrontation were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, financial investigations, and emotional reckonings. The board voted unanimously to reject the Deltasoft offer and to remove my father from his position as CEO. A forensic accounting team uncovered the full extent of his financial malfeasance. Nearly $8 million had been diverted from company accounts to cover personal expenses and gambling debts over the past 7 years. The legal consequences came swiftly. The altered trust documents constituted fraud, and John Wilson, the family attorney who had assisted with the modifications, surrendered his law license rather than face disbarment proceedings. My father faced potential criminal charges for document fraud and embezzlement, though the board was divided on whether to pursue these charges or handle the matter privately to protect the company's reputation. My trust fund was legally reaffirmed as solely mine, with no family oversight provisions. Bernard Abrams was appointed as the new trustee, ensuring that no further attempts could be made to access the funds. The $8 million remained untouched, a significant financial security that now felt bittersweet, given the destruction of my family relationships. Lily's reaction to the scandal evolved in stages. Her initial rage gave way to denial, then to desperate attempts to distance herself from our parents' actions. 2 weeks after the confrontation, she appeared at Jasmine's apartment unannounced. I didn't know, she insisted, her designer, sunglasses failing to hide her puffy eyes. I really thought Grandpa had promised that money for my career. Dad told me you were trying to steal what was rightfully mine. I stood in the doorway, not inviting her in. You believed what was convenient, Lily. You never questioned why you deserved that money more than I did. I was wrong, she admitted, her voice small. I've been spoiled my whole life. Mom and Dad always gave me everything I wanted, and I never thought about where it came from. She hesitated. Can we talk, please? You're the only family I have left who isn't facing criminal charges. Despite Jasmine's skepticism, I agreed to meet Lily for coffee the following day. Our conversation was awkward and strained, but it was a start. I made it clear that rebuilding trust would take time and genuine effort on her part. I'm not giving you money for acting classes or apartments in LA, I told her firmly. If you want my support, you need to show me you're serious about standing on your own 2 feet. For perhaps the first time in her life, Lily nodded without argument. My parents' fall from grace was complete and public. Their social circle, once so important to my mother, evaporated overnight. Former friends suddenly remembered previous instances of financial impropriety they had overlooked. Country club memberships were quietly revoked, and party invitations stopped arriving. My father, facing the ruins of his reputation and career, retreated into a shell of bitterness. He refused my attempts to communicate, sending back my letters unopened. My mother, surprisingly, showed more willingness to acknowledge reality. She called one evening, her voice trembling. I don't expect your forgiveness, she said. What we did was unforgivable, but I want you to know that I recognize how badly we hurt you, not just with the inheritance, but throughout your life. The favoritism, the criticism, the emotional neglect. You deserved better parents than we were. These words, which I had longed to hear for most of my life, now felt hollow in the wake of their betrayal. Still, they represented a glimmer of accountability that my father seemed incapable of offering. Meanwhile, Arnold Weber and the board approached me about taking a leadership role at Hartman Technologies. Despite my marketing background rather than tech expertise, they valued my business acumen and, more importantly, my connection to my grandfather's vision for the company. George always said you understood the heart of this business. Arnold told me, we need that perspective now, more than ever. After careful consideration, I accepted a position as Chief Strategy Officer. My first priority was meeting with employees who had remained loyal through the turbulence. Many shared stories about my grandfather that I had never heard. His quiet generosity towards staff in crisis, his mentorship of young talents, his refusal to lay off workers during economic downturns. Your grandfather could have sold this company for 3 times its value back in 2008, explained Carol Winters, a 30-year veteran of the finance department. A Silicon Valley giant offered him a blank check, basically, but he refused because they wouldn't guarantee jobs for everyone. He said some things are worth more than money. These stories strengthened my resolve to honor his legacy properly. I established new company values emphasizing integrity, innovation, and employee development. We created transparency measures for all financial decisions to prevent future abuses of power. As for my parents' legal consequences, I faced a difficult decision when the district attorney asked for my input on prosecution. Part of me wanted them to face the full weight of justice for what they had done, not just to me, but to the company and its employees, whose livelihoods had been jeopardized by their actions. Yet another part recognized that a highly publicized trial would further damage the company's reputation and reopen wounds that were just beginning to heal. After consulting with the board and much personal reflection, I supported a plea agreement that included financial restitution, community, service, and a suspended sentence for my father. You're being more merciful than I would be, Thomas commented when I told him my decision. It's not about mercy, I explained. It's about what serves justice without causing more harm. My grandfather built this company to create something positive in the world. Dragging his name through a public trial doesn't honor that legacy. Lily, to her credit, began showing signs of genuine change. She enrolled in business courses at the local community college and applied for an entry-level position in the company's marketing department, with the clear understanding that she would receive no special treatment due to her family connection. Her natural charm and social skills, once directed solely towards self-promotion, proved valuable in a professional context when properly channeled. As months passed, the company stabilized under new leadership. We developed innovative products that honored my grandfather's vision while moving the technology forward. Employee morale improved as trust was gradually restored. My own healing was slower and more complicated. The physical and emotional trauma of being dragged by my hair from my childhood home left lasting scars. I worked with a therapist to process the complex grief of losing my family as I had known it, while simultaneously stepping into a leadership role that constantly reminded me of my grandfather. Through it all, the inheritance remained largely untouched in my account, no longer a source of family conflict, but a reminder of my grandfather's foresight and care. Eventually, I would use a portion of it to establish the George and Caroline Hartman Foundation, supporting education for underprivileged students interested in technology careers. But that decision was still in the future as I focused on rebuilding what had been broken: the company, my sense of family, and my own heart. The journey toward healing began in a therapist's office on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, 6 months after the boardroom confrontation that had changed everything. Dr. Rachel Simmons, a specialist in family trauma, sat across from me with compassionate eyes as I recounted my story for what felt like the 100th time. "You've told me the facts," she said gently. "Now I want you to tell me how it felt when your father grabbed you by the hair and dragged you from your home." The question broke something open inside me. For months, I had focused on the practical aftermath: legal proceedings, company restructuring, financial investigations. I had pushed aside the raw, personal pain of that moment of betrayal. "It felt like my entire childhood was a lie," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. For the first time since the confrontation, every birthday dinner, every family vacation, every moment I thought they loved me, it all disappeared in that instant. If they could do that to me, they never really loved me at all. This recognition was the first real step in my healing process. I had to mourn not just the loss of my family relationships as they existed now, but the loss of what I had always believed those relationships to be. Dr. Simmons helped me understand that grief doesn't follow a predictable timeline. Some days I functioned perfectly well, leading meetings at Hartman Technologies, developing new business strategies, rebuilding relationships with employees. Other days, a simple trigger: finding an old family photo or hearing Lily laugh in a way that sounded like our mother would send me spiraling into sadness or anger. "Healing isn't linear," Dr. Simmons reminded me often. "It's more like a spiral. You'll revisit the same painful spots, but each time from a slightly different perspective, with more distance and clarity." During this period, I found unexpected support from my maternal Aunt Catherine, who had been estranged from our family for years. She reached out after reading about the situation in the business press. "Your mother did the same thing to me," she revealed during our first lunch together. "When our parents died, there was an inheritance dispute. Catherine manipulated the situation, turned family members against me, and ultimately took more than her fair share. I've been the family pariah ever since." Catherine became a crucial part of my healing journey, a blood relative who understood exactly what I had experienced and who had rebuilt her life after similar betrayal. She had created a successful interior design business, found a loving partner, and developed a circle of friends who had become her chosen family. "DNA doesn't determine who truly loves you," she told me. "Actions do. Build your life around people who show up for you consistently, not those who claim rights to your loyalty through accidents of birth." This wisdom guided me as I carefully constructed a support system of genuine connections. Jasmine, who had sheltered me in my darkest moment, remained my closest friend. Thomas, whose legal expertise had been invaluable, became a trusted advisor, and eventually more than a friend. Various colleagues at Hartman Technologies, particularly those who had remained loyal to my grandfather's vision, became important parts of my professional and personal life. Gradually, I found the courage to use portions of my inheritance in ways that honored my grandparents while helping others. The George and Caroline Hartman Foundation launched with a $5 million endowment, creating scholarships for promising students from disadvantaged backgrounds who dreamed of careers in technology. "Your grandparents would be so proud," Arnold Weber said at the foundation's opening ceremony. They always believed in giving others the same opportunities they had. My parents' legal situation concluded with my father receiving a suspended sentence and 5 years of probation, along with substantial community service requirements. My mother, who had cooperated fully with investigators, received a lighter sentence. They were forced to sell their lavish home and most of their possessions to make restitution to the company. They moved to a small condo in Florida, largely cut off from their former social circles. My mother occasionally sent cards on my birthday and holidays, tentative attempts at reconciliation that I acknowledged with brief, polite responses. My father never reached out at all, his pride apparently preventing any admission of wrongdoing. Lily's transformation proved more genuine than I had initially expected. She completed her business courses with surprising dedication and worked her way up from an entry-level position in the marketing department to a role that suited her natural talents for communication and relationship building. I spent my whole being the favorite without earning anything, she confessed during one of our infrequent but increasingly comfortable dinners. It feels different to actually work for recognition. Better, actually. Our relationship would never be the easy, carefree, sisterly bond portrayed in movies, but over time, we developed a mutual respect that allowed for a form of friendship neither of us had anticipated. The most profound change, however, was within me. The traumatic betrayal had forced me to reassess everything I thought I knew about family, love, trust, and my own self-worth. Through therapy, supportive relationships, and the daily work of running a company with integrity, I gradually rebuilt my sense of self on firmer ground. 2 years after that life-altering boardroom confrontation, Hartman Technologies had not only recovered but had thrived under new leadership. Our focus on ethical business practices and employee well-being, values my grandfather had championed, attracted top talent and loyal customers. We expanded into educational technology, creating products that made STEM learning accessible to students regardless of their economic background. On the 3rd anniversary of my grandfather's death, I visited his grave alone, placing white roses, his favorite, against the headstone he shared with my grandmother. "You were right to warn me," I said softly, "but you were also right to trust me with your legacy. I'm protecting it the way you would have wanted." The autumn breeze rustled through the cemetery trees, and I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for years. The pain hadn't disappeared entirely. I doubted it ever would, but it had transformed into something constructive, even meaningful. The inheritance that had caused so much conflict had become a tool for positive change rather than a source of division. The betrayal that had nearly broken me had instead revealed my own resilience and capacity for compassion. The loss of my family as I had known it had opened the door to authentic relationships, built on mutual respect rather than obligation. As I drove away from the cemetery, I reflected on the most important lesson I had learned through this ordeal. True wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the integrity with which you live your life and the genuine connections you build along the way. My parents had possessed every material advantage but had sacrificed their integrity and relationships in pursuit of more. I had lost my naive belief in unconditional family love, but had gained a deeper understanding of what real love, the kind that respects boundaries and celebrates growth, actually means. I realized that sharing this story might help others facing family betrayal to know they aren't alone. So I started speaking at conferences about business ethics and family dynamics, connecting with people who had experienced similar situations. The wound of betrayal may never completely heal, but it no longer defines me. Instead, it has become just one chapter in a much larger story, one that I continue to write each day with intention and hope. Have you ever faced betrayal from someone you trusted completely? How did you rebuild your life afterward? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video if my journey resonated with you. Remember, sometimes the people who hurt us most give us the opportunity to discover our true strength. Thank you for listening, and I wish you the courage to transform your own pain into purpose.